Welcome folks. So this video we're gonna talk about the Yeti, the famous Yeti, which is up there in the top 3 of all known cryptids, along with Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. But the Yeti, as we will read here, the Yeti is a Bigfoot. Many of ye, like me, when we were kids, I remember those encyclopedia books. One of them was Mysteries and Monsters, and in it had the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and the Yeti. And I still remember it to this day. The Bigfoot had like a colored drawing of a farmer with a pike in his hand, or some shovel or something, and he's pointing it to this big, huge, tall Bigfoot who's standing on the other side of the fence looking down at him. And in the distance, walking up the mountain into the forest, is another Bigfoot. The two of them, a red Bigfoot with like a cow or a sheep on its shoulder, obviously the farmer's animal. And that was obviously an encounter story, that happened. So these are all memory from a kid of these cryptids. So yeah, the Yeti is, everyone knows about the Yeti. So okay, let's read a bit about the Yeti. So the Yeti is known as the unknown primate of Central Asia, said to be pronounced Yeti, meaning an origin not established, though one derivation is rock animal. Ye meaning snowy mountain or rocky area, and te meaning animal. Variant names: abominable snowman, of course, Dremu, Shamja, which in Tibetan means man animal, Shevni Shevelok, which means snowman in Russian. The Sherpas in the Himalayas often speak of 2 or 3 types of Yeti, though the classification gets blurred. Charles Stoner heard of 2, the Zude, probably a bear, and the Mite, the true Yeti. Tom Slick was told of the Sokpa, the true Yeti, and Zuste, more like a large yak-killing bear, and the Mite, a smaller Yeti. Pandey credits a Sherpa of the Khumbu Valley with distinguishing the Mite, the true Yeti, Zute, the large bear, and Teilme, a small Yeti or gibbon. The scientific name is Dinanthropotis nivalis, given by Bernard Heuvelmans in 1958. Their physical description: thick-set and muscular, height 5 feet 6 inches to 7 feet 6 inches tall, weight 200 to 400 pounds. I always say this in these videos, folks, when we read about this, but they always miscalculate, the weight of these creatures. I mean, I'm 6'3", 230 pounds. A bloody Sasquatch is going to be 800 plus pounds. Anyway, just an observation. So they're covered with a thick coat of dark greyish brown or reddish brown hair. The dark Yetis are said to be larger than the reddish ones. High, pointed head with sagittal crest. Less hair on the face. Both white and dark skin have been reported. Flat nose. Wide mouth, large teeth. Females have large breasts. Arms reach to its knees. Large hands. Long fingers. Bowed legs. Feet are plantigrade, no tail. Scalps. The Yeti scalp at the Pangbuche Monastery in Nepal is 7.5 inches tall, 9.75 inches long, and 6.75 inches wide, and conical. The circumference at the base is 17.25 inches. Reddish hair grows especially thick along a supposed sagittal crest. The blackish skin has the texture of brittle leather. It is said to be from a male. The scalp at the Kunjung Monastery, Nepal, is roughly the same size and said to be from a female. This is the scalp borrowed by Sir Edmund Hillary in 1960 and examined by specialists at the Field Museum in Chicago. It was made from the skin of a Himalayan goat antelope, the Siru. The scalp at the Nuncha Bazar Monastery, Nepal, is an obvious fake copy of others. Mummified hands. A Yeti arm, said to be at the Makulu Monastery in Nepal, consists of the paw and forearm of a snow leopard. The Panchubi Monastery hand is unusual. In 1959, Peter Byrne was permitted to examine the hand, from which he removed the thumb and phalanx, replacing them with human fingers he secretly brought with him. With the assistance of actor James Stewart and his wife Gloria, the real bones were smuggled to England, where they were examined by primatologist W.C. Osman Hill. At first, Hill thought the sample was human, but he later changed his mind, considering it Neanderthal-like. Zoologist Charles A. Lyon was baffled, but George Agogino thought it might be an ape's. When Sir Edmund Hillary examined the Panchboshi hand in 1960, he declared it a mix of human and animal. He was looking at it after Byrne's switch. The current whereabouts of the pilfered sample is unknown. Yeah, so that's a famous story, folks, of how they smuggled that out of Nepal with James Stewart, the actor James Stewart, and his wife. I thought that was interesting. Okay, so their behavior. So again, folks, we're basically describing a Bigfoot here, right? It's a Sasquatch. They're primarily nocturnal, reclusive, migratory, walks bipedally with a sidling gait, but sometimes runs on all fours. So just like their cousins in the United States, Canada, everywhere. Sometimes slides down snowy slopes. We all like to do that, don't we? Sure-footed on steep or difficult ground, females show their breasts over their shoulders to throw their breasts over their shoulders to run. Feeds on pikas, rodents, hares, large insects, birds, eggs, moss, and bamboo shoots, and possibly small yaks, tar, and musk deer. Has apparently raided potato crops and village wells. Can be persuaded to drink the local beer, known as chang. Call is loud, gull-like yelping, meowing, or a high-pitched cry. It also chatters. Yeah, the chattering, we've heard that before, folks, right? The Bigfoot chattering, samurai chattering. When angered, it will damage huts and tear up shrubs. Makes a rough nest from dwarf juniper branches. Apparently has little or no technology. At least 2 reports have it using bow and arrows, although these may actually refer to a wild man type in the same region. A wild man type. Stories of Yeti-human relationships exist. Some families in Malunche and Sri Lanka in Nepal are said to have been raised by a Yeti mother and a Sherpa father, while in Tarke there are families raised by a Sherpa mother and a Yeti father. Tracks. Length 8 to 13 inches, maximum width 4 to 6 inches. Large big toe is separated from 3 or 4 smaller ones. Impression in the snow is deeper than a human track. Trail is a fairly straight line. Stride ranges from 1 foot 8 inches to 3 feet. Their habitat lives in the forest below the snow line, and in the autumn occasionally goes out in search of food on the snowfields from 10,000 to 23,000 feet in Sikkim State, India. It is said to live along the Talangchu escarpment and climb to an altitude of 27,900 feet. Their distribution: the Himalayan mountains of Nepal, Kashmir, India, and Bhutan, the southern Tibetan Plateau, southern Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, and northwestern Yunnan Province, China. Significant sightings. In 1832, British Minister to Nepal Brian H. Hodgson was the first Westerner to write about the ape-like creatures of the high Himalayas, which some of his employees had seen. Lawrence A. Waddell came across large footprints in 1889 at an elevation of 17,000 feet in northeastern Sikkim State, India. His Tibetan guide said they were made by wild men, but Waddell thought they were bear tracks. In 1917, a female Yeti captured a boy from Karanja village near Dajing, Nepal. According to a story told 60 years later, their descendants are said to still live there. On September 22, 1921, Charles Howard Berry encountered gigantic human-like tracks at an altitude of above 20,000 feet in the Lakpa La Pass, Tibet. In 1925, British photographer A.H. Tombazi got a brief glimpse of a naked human figure walking upright at an altitude of 15,000 feet near the Zimu Glacier, Sikkim State, India. Upon reaching the spot where he had seen it, he found 15 small footprints with pointed heels. George Hunt found unidentified tracks at 19,000 feet on the Zimu Glacier, Sikkim State, India in 1937. A man named Mingma of Panbushi, Nepal, was tending his yaks in March 1949 when he heard a loud call. He saw it was a Yeti, so he hid inside a stone but nearby. Through a clink in the stones, he could see the creature only a few feet away. It moved around on two legs and snarled when it saw him in the hut. Mingma thrust a smouldering stick from the fire at it, and the Yeti ran away. Monks at the Thayambushi monastery watched a greyish-brown, 5-foot Yeti emerge from rhododendron bushes and play in the snow in November 1949. The monks scared it away by blowing conch shells and striking cymbals. In December 1950, Sherpa Shen Xingjing was returning to Portshi with some companions after attending a funeral at Thayambushi when a reddish-brown Yeti came up the trail in the moonlight. He hid behind a boulder until the animal passed by 25 yards away. Eric Shipton, Sten Xingxing, and Michael Ward of the Everest Reconnaissance Expedition found a mile-long trail of freshly made human-like footprints at 19,000 feet on the southwestern slope of Melungchi, west of Mount Everest, on November 8, 1951. Shipton's crisp photographs of the trail and one of these tracks next to an ice axe appeared in newspapers around the world. The footprint was 13 inches long and 8 inches wide, with an enormous big toe and second toe nearly as large, and three smaller ones separated from the other two. However, Shipton and Ward are said to have admitted later that the trail had nothing to do with the photographed Yeti print and may have been made by an ibex or Himalayan Thar. In 1954, Daily Mail's Yeti expedition to Nepal found multiple sets of tracks in the snow in 4 locations. The team included mountaineer John A. Jackson, journalist Ralph Izzard, photographer Tom Stobart, zoologist Charles Stoner, and Rizwami Bezos, and naturalist Gerald Russell. On January 8, Stoner found some 10-inch-long human-like tracks at an altitude of 14,000 feet west of Namche Bazaar, on the other side of the Bochi Kosi River. On February 18, Jackson and photographer Stanley Jeeves discovered 3-day-old bipedal tracks that were 10 to 11 inches long and 5 to 6 inches wide at an altitude of 18,500 feet on the Khumbu Glacier north of Pangbush. On February 27, Russell and Izzard found a 3-day-old trail at 15,000 feet in the upper Ududi Kuzi Valley that showed the clear imprint of a big toe and at least 3 smaller ones. They were 8 to 9 inches long and 4 to 5 inches wide, with a stride of 2 feet 3 inches. They followed the trail for 8 miles and found that the original trackmaker had been joined by a second. A third trail was discovered a few days later and followed to a height of 18,000 feet. On March 8 and 9, Jackson and Stobart discovered several sets of fresh tracks at the head of the Chula Kula Valley, and on March 10th, Sherpa Nurbu collected a bag of Yeti droppings from around Lake Mazumba that Russell analysed to find a high percentage of pica, fur and bones. On March 14th, Isert and Russell found more Yeti tracks and droppings above a western fork of the Dudi Kusi. Texas oilman Tom Slick sponsored 3 Himalayan expeditions in search of the snowman. In March and April 1957, Slick and Peter Byrne carried out a reconnaissance in the Uran Kula Valley, during which they discovered 3 sets of bipedal tracks, one of which Byrne and some Sherpas followed for 4 miles near the Shiong Kula Valley, Nepal. Slick took back a cast of a 10-inch print he had found in the mud. It was examined by Charlton Coon, George Agunio, and others in 1959. The February-June 1958 Slick Johnson Snowman expedition was led by Gerald Russell and Peter and Brian Byrne. Expedition member Norman G. Thrainford and Sherpa Ang Dawa discovered a cave in the upper Duli Kusi Valley that Yetis apparently used for shelter. It yielded many droppings with pica bones and hair. Below the snowline, Russell found evidence of the small tail llama. The expedition examined and photographed the Yeti scalp and mummified hand at the Pangbush Monastery. Peter and Brian Burns extended Slick-sponsored wanderings in Nepal throughout most of 1959 constituted the third expedition. Although they found some additional tracks and droppings, their biggest coup was smuggling a portion of the genuine Pangbush hand back to England in January with the help of American actor Jimmy Stewart. Edmund Hillary's 1960 Himalayan Scientific and Mountaineering Expedition concluded that Yeti tracks were distortions of human footprints melted by the snow, that Yeti sightings by Sherpas were unreliable because the mountain transporters did not make a distinction between the supernatural and the real worlds, and that all the scalps were probably fakes. Mountaineer Don Williams heard odd cries and saw a dark figure on a distant ridge while climbing Mount Annapurna in Nepal in March 1970. The next day he found its tracks at 13,000 feet and watched the Yeti again for 20 minutes through binoculars. Edward W. Cronin Jr. and Howard Emery came across the Yeti tracks on December 17, 1972 on a snowfield at 12,200 feet on Kongma Mountain in eastern Nepal. They closely resembled the prints found by Eric Shipton, were distinctly bipedal and measured 9 inches long by 4.7 inches wide. On January 11, 1974, a young Sherpa woman named Lakpa Dolma was tending yaks near Tenbushi, Nepal, when a Yeti grabbed her, dragged her to a nearby stream, then proceeded to attack and kill her yaks. Police arrived a few days later and found tracks. John Hunt and his wife discovered a row of fresh, large, oval footprints near the Khumba Glacier in Nepal in November 1978. They were about 13.75 inches long and 6.75 inches wide. John White and John Allen found tracks 8 inches long by 4 inches wide in December 1979 on a mountain above the Hinka Valley, Nepal, after hearing a piercing scream that the Sherpas identified as Yetis. A Polish Everest expedition headed by geophysicist Andrzej Sawada in March 1980 found tracks at 18,000 feet that measured 14 inches long and 5 and 7 inches wide. In October 1984, Tim McCartney Snape and Greg Mortimer found Yeti tracks near the summit of Mount Everest. Yeti photographs taken by Tony Woolridge in the Garhwal Himalaya of Uttar Pradesh State, India on March 6, 1986 probably show a rock outcrop, though primatologist John Napier was impressed with the entire series. Near Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir State, India, a huge grey-haired Yeti was seen after a loud noise was heard in the jungle on January 16, 1987. Chris Bonington and 3 other mountaineers came across a set of day-old tracks in April 1987 near the Minglung Glacier at 16,000 feet. They measured 12 inches by 3 to 4 inches and were 4 inches deep in the snow. Bonington spent 10 weeks looking for Yeti evidence. British Broadcasting Corporation BBC film producer John Paul Davison briefly saw the dark shape of a creature watching him. biologist Arkady Tishkov of the Soviet Chinese glaciological expedition observed a Yeti on the southeastern slope of Mount Shikabangwak, Tibet, for nearly an hour on September 22nd, 1991. He took several photographs, but the distance was too far. The Yeti ran away when it saw Tishkov approaching. Alleged Yeti hairs and claw marks were found in the hollow of a cedar tree in eastern Bhutan in early 2001 by British zoologist Rob McCall, who sent the hairs to the Oxford Institute of Molecular Medicine, where geneticist Brian Sykes conducted a DNA analysis. He could not match them with humans, bears, or any other known hair type. So there you go, folks. That was a long one and very difficult to read with all those Tibetan names. But I got through it, and not a lot of really, great encounter stories, more footprints, but they're there, they're everywhere. Especially about the Yeti, what a lot of people don't know is they don't live up in the mountains. They live in the forest below the mountains, and like it said here, sometimes they use the mountain passes to go from one area to the other, or they go hunting in the mountains sometimes. But the abominable snowman Yeti. Right, folks, I hope you enjoy this one, and I'll catch you next time. Right, bye for now.